Hi everyone, and welcome to the Southerners Northern Garden. So today I'm going to be doing my hydrangea tour. I'm not going to be doing a garden tour this month. I will show you some things in the garden as I go along that look good, just so I don't have to do another super long video this month. So there are 4 types of hydrangeas in my garden. We have the Paniculatas, which have the football-shaped blooms, the arborescence type hydrangeas, which have the snowball look that are just typically white. They do come in some maroon or burgundy colors these days. I have Hydrangea serrata, which is also called mountain hydrangea. And the last hydrangea family that I have in my garden is Macrophylla, also known as the big leaf hydrangea. Those are typically the pink and blue blooms that you'll see. So a few things about hydrangeas in general. You can get hydrangeas that bloom on old wood or hydrangeas that bloom on new wood. Some new varieties bloom on both. So this right here is a Limelight on standard is what it's called. It's basically a tree form. Hydrangea Limelight blooms on new wood, so you can prune it back pretty harshly. Blooming on new wood simply means that it sets its buds on this year's growth. So in the event you live in a harsh climate, Limelight's a very good variety for you. Any of the panicle hydrangeas, because they all bloom on new wood. So if you have a really tough winter and it kills off buds on your hydrangeas that you typically have that are pink or blue, then you won't have that issue with Limelight or any other panicle hydrangea. Hydrangea arborescens, which is also called the smooth leaf hydrangea, also produces blooms on new wood. So you can also prune those down quite significantly in the late winter, early spring, and they will produce new buds for you. Hydrangea serrata, which is known as mountain hydrangea, is a bit different. So Hydrangea serrata typically blooms only on old wood, which means last year's growth. So if you want to prune on those, you need to do so after they bloom early in the season, because it begins setting its buds for the next season. However, the hydrangeas that I'm going to show you in my garden that are Hydrangea serrata, including tiny Tuff stuff, produce blooms on both old wood and new wood. That means if I have a really tough winter, I may get some dieback on the hydrangea. It may not bloom super early in the spring, but it should bloom throughout the season as that new growth is put on and new buds are formed. The last hydrangea variety I will show you in my garden is Hydrangea Macrophylla. So these are the typical pink or blue blooms that you may be reminded of from your grandparents' house. Those previously have only bloomed on old wood. If you have them in your yard and they're not performing, it's best just to remove them if you're in a tough climate with bad winters. They're never really going to perform for you very well. The hydrangeas that I'm going to show you today, I have found one that does really well in my garden, and it blooms on both old wood and new wood, just like my Hydrangea serrata mountain hydrangeas. And so that means if I have a really tough winter, they will produce blooms on new wood, and although I may not get blooms early in the season, I will get blooms later in the season, guaranteed. So let's get going, everyone. We'll start out with this Limelight hydrangea and the rest of the Paniculatas in my garden. I will go through one entire variety type, and then I'll come back around and go to the next one. So Hydrangea Paniculata, which form the football-shaped blooms, produce on new wood. And so this is Limelight. This is the granddaddy, I guess, of most of the Paniculatas. It can get really large, so 10 to 12 foot tall and wide. This is on standard. They can be pruned quite a bit, so you can keep them somewhat shape controlled, although eventually the stems are going to get really woody, and you'll just want to kind of keep it between that 8 and 10 foot size. So being on standard, this one will stay a little smaller, but it's still going to fill out over the years, which is really nice. I wanted it to be a statement piece on the end of my patio. As you know, I have another one on the other side, and they're looking gorgeous this year. So I'm really impressed with Limelight. This one did start blooming a little later, so if it seems to be not colored up as much as one in your garden, that's because I was really late pruning these back. I pruned them back after they had already started putting on some growth instead of right before, right as they were putting on some growth. So it bloomed much later this season than in past seasons, but I'm really impressed with it this year. This is their first year in the ground. They've had a season last year, and this is their second full season, so about a year and a half. This one had to be replaced. As you know, I have some clay soil issues, and so the one I had here died from too much water, and so I replaced it later in the season. As a result, the trunk on this one's not quite as large. The ones I had picked out originally were very mature and had really big trunks, so that's kind of sad. But this one has quite honestly held its own. It's looking better than the one that's more mature and older than it, even though they've been in my garden about the same time. The second variety of hydrangea in my garden I wanted to show you is Bobo. Bobo is one of my new all-time favorites. I have a hedge of them around my patio here. They only get 3 to 4 foot tall and wide. They're one of the smallest paniculatas you can get, although Proven Winners has released some new varieties this year and next year that are also really small. The thing I really love about Bobo is it stays really tiny, so it's going to form a perfect little shrub right here, but it also is one of the most floriferous paniculata hydrangeas you will find. Mine's got a little dry from the hot weather we've had, and I've clipped off some blooms here and there, but it just continues to produce panicles throughout the summer. And as you can see, it's constantly blooming. It's putting on new ones all the time. So if I went through and trimmed some of these, I would probably get some new blooms throughout the season. But they don't look too bad, so I'm going to leave them as is for now. Once again, this one is Bobo, and they make a nice small hedge for anywhere around your patio or garden or along your driveway. So this hydrangea I've introduced you to many times. It's called Pinky Winky. It has some of the largest panicles of any panicle type hydrangea. It turns, as most hydrangeas do, to pink as the summer progresses, and the panicles continue to elongate. It does have a larger bloom and a more open bloom than a lot of other panicle hydrangeas, so the pollinators really love it. You can see this bug right here. It's always covered up with bees or wasps or any other friendly pollinators in the garden, and I really enjoy it. Just like Limelight, it can get very large, 8 to 10 to 12 foot tall and wide, although just like Limelight, it can be size controlled and pruned on quite a bit. So this is the second season these are in my garden. They were planted in March or May of 2020, and I'm really impressed with the growth these have put on and how they have settled into my clay soil. I have a total of 5 of them. If you've been watching my channel, you know there's one back there in the very back. You can see it a little bit here in the distance. That one is going to have to get dug up and moved because the fence is going to be coming right through that area. So I've got to find a place for it. But it is one of my favorite varieties out here, just because it is kind of an airy bloom and provides a lot of texture to the garden, even when the blooms don't look the best. I just wanted to show you this one as well. This is also Limelight, but this is in shrub form instead of tree form like the ones I showed you before. Once again, Limelight gets 8 to 10 foot tall and wide, and this one is also in its second season in my garden, so the blooms are a little smaller than the tree form one I showed you earlier. Back here we have a variety called Zinfandel. Now Zinfandel I grew from a 1 quart container it's been 2 or 3 seasons ago. So as you can see, this one's burning a little bit on the south side of my house because it gets very, very hot over here. But Zinfandel changes this beautiful pink color really early in the season. So you can see that beautiful ombre effect on these blooms. It just turns pink from the bottom up, and it produces quite large panicles as well. This one doesn't get quite as large as the other ones I showed you, so around 6 to 8 foot tall and wide. It did not perform very well for me last year, whether that was because of the heat and because it was also just such a small new shrub, I don't know, but this year it did quite well. So I highly recommend Zinfandel if you're looking for a nice pink ombre bloom in your garden and a hydrangea that stays 6 to 8 foot tall and wide. This hydrangea is known as Quickfire. There's a variety called Little Quickfire that stays a little smaller than this. It's named Quickfire because it produces its blooms earlier than any other hydrangea on the market. Proven Winners has released one called Quickfire Fab. That is coming out. I believe it was available this year for purchase if you needed a smaller variety that produced nice full panicles, kind of like the Limelights. I put Quickfire here because I got it on sale. Little Quickfire would have probably been a better option because this one is going to get quite large, but as I mentioned, these can be size controlled quite well as well. So this is its 3rd season in the garden, I believe, but once again, these were purchased from quart to 1 gallon containers. I got it the same year I got Zinfandel. To the right of Quickfire, I have Firelight. Firelight's another panicle hydrangea, so it will bloom on new growth. It gets about the same size as Limelight, 8 to 12 foot tall and wide, and the blooms on this hydrangea change to pink earlier than Limelight does, so it's a nice variety. I like to have a large variety in my garden just so I can have the option of different blooms throughout the season. So that's all the panicle hydrangeas in my garden. Not a lot, right? I have almost 70, and I will probably have closer to 80 hydrangeas in my garden before the end of the year. The next variety I want to talk about is arborescens or smooth hydrangea. Arborescens and smooth hydrangea bloom on new wood, and they produce these nice balls right here. This one is called Incrediball by Proven Winners, a play on Incredible. So if you're looking for it, it's Incrediball, B-A-L-L, not Incredible. And they get 5 to 6 foot tall and wide. So I formed a nice hedge here. I'll show you of them. These have been in my garden for 3 years, and they were planted as 3-gallon containers to begin with. So if you're looking for Incrediball, it is a beautiful variety that holds up its blooms quite well. So when you have really strong rain showers and you are used to these Annabelle type hydrangeas, they tend to flop really well. These, after they get older, do hold up their blooms really well. So in the first couple years, you may notice that it's not holding up its blooms really well. Just give it time and make sure you're pruning it correctly. I do have an entire video on YouTube on how to prune this specific hydrangea. I will link it below if I remember. If not, just type in pruning arborescens type hydrangeas. So once again, this one is Incrediball. I'll take you around and show you a couple more I have in my garden. Just if you're watching my channel for the first time and you want to see what this hedge looks like, I followed along here. I did prune back my daylilies, and I need to prune back my Stand By Me clematis. It's gotten quite large. I will probably be moving these to get more sun to the new flower beds in the garden later this season. I don't want to do that right now and risk ruining the plants because it's so hot right now. So here is the hydrangea hedge of the Incrediballs, and then down here I will transition to a different type hydrangea. So here's 𝗣𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗢, this tiny hydrangea you see right here. I'm getting more of these in my garden, hopefully this fall, but they only get 1 to 2 foot tall and wide. They're almost like a mini version of Incrediball, which is one reason I purchased them to put under this tree to kind of continue around the Incrediball hedge around the spruce. I really love them. I bought them as tiny 4-inch containers a couple years ago, and you can see they get mostly shade, but they're performing pretty well. This variety right here is also 𝗣𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗢, so you can see how they perform in full sun. They're a little more full, but this variety was larger when I purchased it versus being the small 4-inch containers that I got on the other around the spruce hedge. So this one started out a little bigger, and it's doing really well. You can see there's one right here almost in the same area. That was a 4-inch container that I had left over from creating the hedge, and how much smaller it is. So these do take a little while to get going, but once they get going, they offer a beautiful little shrub for your garden. This one's getting a little burnt. Our weather's just been awful, and despite having drip irrigation, it's next to impossible to keep enough water on these sometimes so that they don't burn late summer in August. But you could trim off those blooms if you didn't like the crispy look, and it would produce some new blooms for you, because like the other Annabelle type hydrangeas, they bloom on new wood. So this hydrangea in my garden is mini Mauvette, and it's also an arborescens type hydrangea, and it produces kind of mauve colored blooms as they emerge, and then it fades to this greener color later in the season. I have 2 of these, and let me tell you, they are one tough hydrangea because I transplanted them in the middle of the summer last year in the heat, and they died almost completely to the ground and came back looking pretty good this year. And the last hydrangea of their arborescens series in my garden are these Invincibelle Ruby. Invincibelle Ruby gets 3 to 4 foot tall and wide, and I put these into my garden to form a nice little hedge. If you follow along my channel, you know I lost one on the end down here because of a clay soil issue, but I'm trying to get that resolved. I haven't worked on it a whole lot, and that will probably be a fall project. So Invincibelle Ruby, the panicles come out a really beautiful red ruby color, and as they age, they turn to this color right here, and eventually they just get this dusty red look about them. So they're a nice little color. The hydrangeas aren't in much color right now just because it's late summer. They'll continue producing some new pink blooms if I was to give them a trim, which I may do after this hydrangea tour. I didn't want to go around cutting all my stuff off before I could show it to you guys. So as we transition to Hydrangea serrata, which is known as mountain hydrangea, this is tiny tough stuff, and it makes a circle around this magnolia that I have here, just all the way around. And it is a beautiful lace cap flower, which means it has these florets on the side, and in the center it has fertile florets for all the pollinators. These are a beautiful variety that bloom on both old wood and new wood, so in the event you need to prune them, you will still get blooms, or if you have a bad winter. But if you don't do any pruning and leave them to their own devices, like these should be left, they'll produce a ton of little florets for you. It's later in the season, so these are got their dusty color, and these will be soil dependent. So if you have a low pH soil, they will turn blue, and as you know, I have high pH soil, so nearly all of my hydrangeas that are pH dependent turn a pink color. So once again, this is tiny tough stuff, looking incredible this time in the season. Also looking incredible are all the geraniums that I grew from seed. I did come and prune these out a little bit yesterday, but they're coming out again, and I'm getting some rebloom on my mango salsa roses. That is absolutely gorgeous. A quick update on my 22 annual discount container. You can see it's absolutely looking amazing, filling in really well since I converted it to the regular drip that my regular petunias are on. So the next variety I want to talk about, which is not in my garden, but I picked up from Home Depot earlier this summer, a few weeks ago, is Tuff Stuff 𝗄𝗡𝗧. So I just showed you tiny Tuff Stuff. It only gets 2 to 3 foot tall and wide. It produces on old and new growth. This one also produces on old and new growth as well, but it's called Tuff Stuff 𝗄𝗡𝗧. So you can see all the new blooms it's putting on since I brought it home. We've got one here, there, and it produces these really large florets with double infertile florets, as you can see here, these blue ones. These are pH dependent as well, so in my garden they'll probably be pink. In your garden they may be blue. You can treat your soil with either sulfur to lower the pH or lime to raise the pH. I have not had much luck in my soil doing that. I think it's simply because we have such high pH soil that I'm not able to do that. But I'm going to be working on that over the next couple years to see if I can change some of my hydrangeas blue, because I really love that color in the garden. So once again, Tuff Stuff 𝗄𝗡𝗧. I have a total of 7 of these, I believe, and they'll be going in the new flower bed. One thing about these is they like sun, which is not as typical about hydrangeas with these type of really succulent leaves. So I need to get plenty of drip on these and put them in the sun, so they'll be really happy. I'll form a nice drift of them, and it'll look really gorgeous. So as we transition to the next hydrangea type, I want to introduce you to a variety that I have found that does well in my Zone 6 garden, despite us having some really rough winters. So Macrophylla hydrangeas, which you are probably familiar with because they form these blue, pink, or purple blooms, tend to not do very well in the north or anywhere there are really bad winters. And that's because traditionally they bloom on old wood. A lot of other types of plants also bloom on old wood, like Weigela and viburnum and that type thing. During recent years, they have been bred to also bloom on new wood. So Proven Winners has a line of new hydrangeas that bloom on both old wood and new wood that are the Macrophylla type. And this variety is by Endless Summer. I picked up 3 of them last year from Home Depot. I bought them on sale. They were like $12 and they were burnt to a crisp late in summer, and I brought them home, gave them a lot of water, soaked them in water for 30 minutes, gave them some fertilizer, and they actually started producing completely new leaves and blooms before the season was out. So that's how I knew that those hydrangeas would do well in my climate, simply because they were already producing new buds just a month or 2 after I had them. So I also picked up these on sale at Home Depot a while back. I believe they were $5 a piece. And so I believe there are almost 14 of these. I'm going to be planting these under the spruce. Macrophylla hydrangeas need a morning sun location, part sun. They just don't need that hot afternoon sun. So you can see these are purple color. That's because the pH is pretty neutral. In my climate, next year they will probably turn completely pink. So this is Endless Summer BloomStruck. You need to know when you're picking out hydrangeas that these are oftentimes in Both Lowe's and Home Depot, and Endless Summer also has one. It's just called the Original. The Original does not bloom on new wood, so if you put that in a climate like mine, you will hardly get any blooms on it each spring. So this one produces both on old wood and new wood, and it's actually produced this bloom since I brought it home a few weeks ago. So that gives you a good indication of the success with these hydrangeas. Once again, be wary of their Original. Some people call it Endless Bummer instead of Endless Summer, but the BloomStruck variety seems to do really well. And I also like it because these new stems have red growth on them, so even in winter they look really cool, or even when they don't have blooms on them, when they're growing out in the spring, they look really interesting. Behind me, I have a paniculata I did not introduce you to because it's quite floppy still, but this is Limelight Prime. It's an improvement on Limelight that I showed you earlier in the tree form that's right here next to me. It blooms on stronger stems, so it has more upright growth. It's a little more compact, 6 to 8 foot tall and wide, and the blooms change to a pink color earlier in the season than Limelight do. So this one's still pretty floppy. So I got this variety as a gallon-sized shrub last year directly from Proven Winners. Proven Winners put out a sale on a batch of them around August, September last year, and I snagged it really quick because I knew they're not available until this year. So these are in containers, and right now they're kind of struggling because it's been so dang hot. But after the fence is installed later this season, these are going to be put on either side of a gate that I'm going to have entering my neighbor's property here. So they will form a nice white globe of blooms on either side of the gate that get 6 to 8 foot tall and wide. So one thing I didn't mention previously is panicle hydrangeas can take full sun in my area. Limelight's one of the hardiest hydrangeas all the way through zone 3 to zone 8 or 9, I believe. So if you need a hydrangea that stretches a wide variety of ranges, Limelight is certainly for you. Limelight in my location can take full sun, especially if you give it drip. If you live in the south, be considerate of how much hot sun you place them in because they could burn. If you have them on drip and you run drip long enough, they should be perfectly fine, but with the humidity and the heat in some of these locations, they will start burning if they don't receive enough water. Macrophylla type hydrangeas like part sun to morning sun, do not put them in direct hot sun heat of the day. Serrata is kind of a mix, part sun to full sun. And then smooth hydrangeas can also, similarly to panicle hydrangeas, take full sun depending on your zone. So be very cautious and put those on drip as well, even if you have them in part sun. I have mine on the north side of the house. They get hit with blazing sun in the evening as the sun sets this way, and they still do miraculous. But I do have those on drip, and they've been on drip since they were installed 3 years ago. So now is the perfect time to pick up hydrangeas at your garden center or at Home Depot or Lowe's. They may look a little rough. Bring them home, trim off all the blooms so they're not supporting those blooms if they look rough, and soak them in some good water. I would prefer maybe 30 minutes. Just dunk them in a bucket of water, and then give them a nice feed of root stimulant or just a generic fertilizer, preferably liquid so it can get some liquid organic fertilizer to these hydrangeas. You don't want to be fertilizing them too late in the year because it will push new growth, which can be damaged over winter. But if you do it now, that growth has plenty of time to harden before winter and you should be fine. So thank you guys for joining me for my hydrangea garden tour. I will have a regular garden tour up next month in September, likely the end of September. By that time, my zinnias will be fully blooming. I'll have some more color in the garden, hopefully. And the backyard will make quite a significant progress, I hope, in the things that are planted in it, and that will be coming along by then. I'm hopeful I can get my fence installed early. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case, but if it is, that's even better because I can start creating these beds along the side of the yard and filling those with beautiful plants and trees to prepare for spring, to get them settled in nicely before winter comes and be just gorgeous next spring. If you have any questions about any of the hydrangeas I showed you or hydrangeas in general, feel free to drop those below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. Bye.